Alrighty. So this is going to be something of an experiment. Let's see what we get. Hi, I am Chris from Airwindows. And here's my weird new form of streaming. Not sure what you'll make of this. Might find it to be kind of unusual or disconcerting. But, you know, just one of those things, right? We will do our level best to get a stream going. And I'll try not to have too much nightmare fuel. And I'm just playing with one of my toys. Don't mind me. Namely, it's a little thing called the Sleepy Circuits Hypno, which I'm able to use to do weird stuff with. And I'll switch it off. Hey, Lorenzo. I'll switch it off in a moment. I'm just fooling around. Look, I'm inverted. What this is, oh, check it out. Feedback effects. And, hey, look, it's chat. So yeah, this is actually a Codestream, but I thought I would start it off with a bang with a bunch of complete madness. I'm doing a number of experiments. This is only one of them. Yeah, it is. You're not wrong. Here's some very intense feedback. See, what's going on there is use of a sort of insane multiple feedback thing. This is all done with a Sleepy Circuits Hypno and a video camera. And it's a Razer, let's see, what is this thing's name? Does it have its name written on it somewhere? I bet it does. Yeah. A Razer Kaio, which has a little light built in. I'm going to be using this light for the regular coding stream as an extra light. But I'm always trying to throw something fun in. And now that I have the Hypno, like where I can reach it, I get to do all kinds of stuff as a part of, you know, this that I do. So what we're seeing right now is the Sleepy Circuits Hypno. It's a direct output, although I can actually see that's what I really look like. But this is the camera, and you plug the camera through a little adapter directly into the Hypno, and it lets you have a video feed. So it's a very cool toy, and it likes extreme close-ups for some of its effects, some of its disturbing sorts of effects. So you can kind of get a sense of what's going on there. And then what I've got, this is the hip. Oh, you can't actually see it so good. You don't have a live feed of the cam. That's not possible. But I can't move the real camera to show it. But the Sleepy Circuits Hypno looks kind of like this, only not. let's see. So yeah, if I aim this just right, maybe I can show you a little bit of what the thing looks like. See that without all of the insanity, this is what a hypno looks like. And this is the video feed. I can zoom in on that. It's changing the frequency of it. And this is another thing which was serving as a feedback device. You can select different colors, and if you go all the way through to this blue color, that's the video input. And then these do things like rotate the thing around or turn it into circles. And then this is sort of brightness and intensity and a feedback effect that you can get into. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I've been setting up. And what I like about this is, like, I can do that kind of crazy madness. Here, check this out. You hold down one of these buttons and turn one of the knobs, and you can go into bizarre kaleidoscope lands. Or even more intense kaleidoscope lands. And you can see that I'm still recognizable here, although we could fix that pretty good by putting in video feedback. And yeah, just loads of video fun, trying to zero in on things like your eye or your mouth. Definitely possibilities here for making insane music videos off the desktop fairly easily. And then you can also hold down the middle button to do a feedback effect that we're not getting, and then you tap the middle button to make insane other things happen. And then if you're making insane other things happen, you can also show the camera to the actual screen. Oh, it just went black. And yep, lots of wackiness. In fact, I'm not really sure how to get out of that one. Let's see. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm in a color mode. So technically that's my face, but it might look a little unorthodox at the moment. So yeah, we'll do the entire coding video like this, okay? That's going to be comprehensible, right? I'm just fooling. Inverse. World of guitars. Yeah, it's a 300 neck guitar. Yeah, so it's always fun to have new stuff to try. Why would I do an Airwindows video synth when I can get this? I don't actually know how this works. The Hypno is not an open source device, but I'll tell you, I've been doing some fun things lately. Here, let's get rid of the cam, or rather sit the cam over here and just point it at me. turn back on the screen. And we're not actually going to do anything with the video synth. I was just playing with it to start off, because how can I not? As you can see, it's great fun. Boop. We're going to go over to the laptop, because this is really about coding some plugins. Actually, while I'm at it, I might as well unplug that video cam. Hey David, I thought you might like that video jamming. That kind of stuff is definitely good fun. So yeah, I don't have all that much on the agenda today, but what I'm thinking is this is a fine day to do a little more work on the MackEQ and more Mackie modeling, and just we'll catch up a little bit on some of the stuff that's been going on, including a place on the internet that you can catch up with me maybe a little bit more often if such things interest you, 2 of them to be exact. And I'm also testing something out. The thing I'm testing out is OBS had an update recently where it is supposed to, you're supposed to be able to now use Apple's hardware encoder. And I'll tell you why that's significant. And also why I'm paying close attention to whether it's real or not. And I can see my kilobytes per second is not very high. That's because, I'm pretty sure that's because that is a, here, let's switch back off of that. Okay, there we go. Let's see what happens with this kind of thing. I'm experimenting with this hardware encoder, and there's been an OBS update which supposedly makes it so that you can use Apple's hardware encoder built into Macs. Actually, no, I'm not on Instagram. I ditched my Instagram. There might still be something there, but I don't really use it. So the OBS hardware encoder Apple's hardware encoder used to be a guaranteed way of killing your stream, and YouTube would crash and die if you used it. And there's apparently been an update, which is on a newer version of OBS, which I'm using. Oh, by the way, I never turned on chat windows, so hang on. There we go. I have been looking into this, and one of the things with the Apple hardware encoder is that it used to automatically kill your stream. And I learned this fooling around with like Minecraft streams and stuff. It's one of the reasons that stopped, is that I couldn't do it on the main computer that I stream from, so I had to do a weird, cumbersome extra way of doing things. In the new version of OBS, apparently they fixed that, so we're going to find out. And I'll see. Because the thing is, if they fixed it and it does in fact work, that means I can do other things, like, namely, I'm using just 2.8% CPU doing this. And it's a pretty high resolution stream as these things go. Hang on, let me get my, I'm going to put that camera back because I am just so dark now that I'm going to use this as just a handy light. There we are. So a bit of a handy light. Yeah, the Apple hardware encoder is clearly labeled, but it's not called Video Toolbox. It's something else. Actually, I can show you, I bet. Here, we do all kinds of things on these streams. So I know that I promised I was going to code, but I could also do this. Camera over stream. Screen, not stream. Move it over like that, and I'll show you if indeed, oh no, hang on. Yeah, can you see that dialog box? I think so. So, and it doesn't show anything that I need to worry about, but Apple VTH264 hardware encoder. And since I am streaming, I can't do anything about that. And I'm telling it 5000K, but it's bouncing all over the place. And I'm given to understand if you tell it limit bitrate, it dies. So you have to avoid doing that. So there you have it. That's what you look for. And the idea is I'm going to be finding out whether the stream actually works on this. So I'm going to have to keep a bit of an eye on whether the stream crashes or not. It's a bit of a torture test there. It's claiming I have an excellent connection, but there's really no telling. Experience will tell us what that really means. And if I can do this, I can do camera over screen, which is the way that I record videos in Logic and demonstrate plugins like Coils 2, which is the most recent one that I coded on stream a week or so ago. And I could also learn how to use VCV Rack. And if the computer doesn't have to be completely bogged down in coding things because the coprocessor chip is doing that, that means I could start doing VCV Rack streams and showing people how to do stuff in the line of modular synthesis in a way that if your computer can run Rack, you can do it free. Because of course Rack is open source software, and we consider that very important. There's also somebody out there who makes a Windows port, and I'm making new coder friends these days who might even be able to coach me through doing things like Rack plugins and stuff like that. That's the other thing I was beginning to mention, that I'm in some new places on the internet at the moment. Not really new places, but a long time ago, not a long time ago, just a few months, but it seems like a long time, 248 ports to Apple Silicon ago, I used to do Twitter and Facebook and Discord and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And due to some, personal conflicts and things, I ended up ditching all of that at the same time. Well, what happened just the other day is that somebody popped back up onto my radar, and it was Colin Benders, the modular synthesizer guy. And he posted this video, which was premiering, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen him for months. He just stopped streaming. He did a live gig, and the trouble with this guy doing a live gig, it's like my rig. Here, check this out. I'm getting ready to get back into this stuff too. So his rig was kind of like my rig over here, where in order to take it on the road, he had to take his thing apart completely. And he did some live performances, and they were very cool live performances. And then once he was finished, he, I guess, carted all this stuff home and was like, oh no, now I have to put all this back together again. And just stopped doing anything for a goodly number of months. So, just the other day, he did a stream about how he was going to be putting his rig back together and the new way that he was arranging it with things like sort of districts of things. Like right here, there's a district of WMD percussion modules. And I was like, oh, I'm doing some of that stuff myself. And in the YouTube chat was all these people I remembered as being basically cool, nice people. People like my chat. And I went, wow, I was kind of missing out. I remember these people were cool. And I kind of ditched them because I ditched Discord and all that other stuff. While the isolation has helped me do hundreds of plugin ports, and while that is valuable, I feel like I was missing out. So what I did was I fired up a new Discord account, one that doesn't make friends and isn't connected to any of the previous stuff that I used to do, but it existed so that I could go back onto Colin Bender's Modular Mayhem Discord server, which is thousands upon thousands of people, of which maybe dozens of them are posting on a regular basis, and they're a kind of built-in audience for synthesizer stuff. And that's a place to catch up, but also the Surge synthesizer Discord is just lit. It is amazing. There is a small little group of people who super know what they're doing, and they know the stuff that where I have gaps. Like, I'm good at thinking up ways of making algorithms sound cool. And here, let me switch back over to, yep. So I do have a way of being able to make algorithms sound cool, and have enjoyed that a lot. One of the people over there was like, so why are you not using Faust for your signal processing? Because Faust is, you can run the thing on the web and it will let you make oscillators and stuff that you can hack together, just playing them on a MIDI keyboard plugged into the web. Very interesting, handy little thing to fool with. And the person was asking, well, why do you not use Faust for your DSP stuff? And I was like, because all of my DSP stuff is totally different from typical ways of doing things, and I always bend and twist the algorithms in different directions to make them sound the way that I want. So nothing that I do that way is really sort of out of the box. But that's the person that introduced me to Faust. And the person who's doing a lot of the heavy coding on the Surge synthesizer was still there, and they remembered who I was and were excited about how they had just added Galactic to Surge, because of course it's open source, and they have a pipeline now where they can integrate anything in very simply and easily. So they did it, and they were like, wow, I really loved Galactic, put it in Surge. I'm like, cool. I guess I have to update Surge now because that sounds awesome. And I talked with the coder guy that I mentioned, goes by Bacon Paul. And I had been in a conversation about how I'd like to do a new DAW that was a completely different kind of design from how people normally do them. And like maybe no timeline, just a box that you could record linear tracks on for the purpose of facilitating different ways of working with it. And Bacon Paul chimed in and was like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to do something like that too. That guy has the chops to do it. He's also got a lot of other stuff to do, but that guy is capable of doing that. And he was like, except for it needs to have one of those little tape counters like you'd have in the old Porta Studio, so that it would kind of roll around rather than having a neat digital readout. And I was like, okay, Sure. Yeah, that works. We can totally do that. So basically everything I've ever said about how it would be cool to design a DAW, I apparently now have a potential cohort, somebody that I could team up with, and we can make something crazy happen along those lines. Because rather than just being one person with a weird idea of what would be an interesting and good DAW, now there's a couple of people with the same weird idea that nobody else likes or wants. So to my mind, that is a perfect excuse to run off and do the thing. And for that reason, I would like to mention that if you join the Colin Benders' Modular Mayhem Discord or the Surge Synth Discord, those are social places that I'm dropping in, which I haven't been doing for months. I've been completely isolated for months because I've been working. And I'm going to continue to do that. I'm not going to completely ditch what I've gained, ditch what I've learned from dropping all the social media stuff. But I had taken it farther than it needed to go. I do benefit from having some connection to other people, because I was really going to a point where I was just cynical and disenchanted with a lot of stuff and had ditched other people completely, and I was only going to do work. Well, not so much. So let us go over to, okay, maybe not this, but Code Zone. And we will see what happens to the, like I said, I'm going to go for about 2 hours. We're going to code something. It's going to be more MackEQ. Let's clean that up. And we'll familiarize ourselves with what this is. Excuse me, some days my health isn't all that great. If I'm coughing up chunks today, then forgive me. We'll see whether we left it in a buildable state. We did. And we're also going to see whether the YouTube compression works as far as whether the stream dies at some point. And another thing that I was checking in on is I wanted to see whether I could run one of those versions of OBS that lets you put in the chat in a more coherent way, because OBS doing a window capture is apparently really inefficient, although it doesn't seem to be minding. But the one that I was looking at requires Big Sur, and the streaming computer isn't running Big Sur, and I'm not really prepared to switch to it as just yet. I'm running it on the M1, and I'm comfortable with running it on the M1, but I'm not really comfortable with taking the main machine and moving it to Big Sur just yet. So it could happen. If it did, I'd have the option of an OBS that can integrate things like chats and such. I mean, the goal there would be to do the sort of stream thing where they have all those crazy special effects that I'm currently doing with the A10 Mini, which is a very limited way of doing that. Like, I can cut between cameras, and cameras are great, but there's all manner of fancy stuff that... And David, as far as that is concerned, you must remember I'm not a musician. Not by the standard of somebody like Colin or whatever. What I am is I'm coding plugins and fitting in real well with communities like that. But I'm not on Colin's level as far as performing in a modular synth. Although, one of the things I'd like to do, and I'm thinking about even going on Twitch with this, and getting that going, seeing as I'm like gearing everything back up again. I'm thinking about doing more of the modular streams. Like here, if I hit this button, boop, I can do fun things like the lights that I have right now, by which you can see me. There's a light there, and there's a light there, and there's a light there. I could do funky things with these. They are a sort of thing that I got off Amazon, which is basically just like a spotlight with the same stuff that was in a light strip that I got. So essentially, I can tell it to do certain amount of flashy light show stuff, and that doesn't count the light strips that I had the top of the room, which are sound sensitive, and those aren't on right now. So with the combination of those and, let's see, these, if I hold this in the right place, I should be able to change these lights to various things, or indeed back to white like this. I could get my modular streaming thing going again and have it look fancy. The camera angle you're seeing is probably the angle that I would be using. I've even got some other stuff here, like one of the things I have sitting here was specifically here so that I could show you. When I was promising to do the DIY thing, this is one of the tools that I needed to build for myself. This is a soldering station with a ring light attached to it, where the ring light has its own stand. This newer thing, it comes with the stand. I see I have some tape stuck on it here in several places. And what I did to make that work is, this is a clamp for drums, and it's holding a tom holder, and the tom holder is connected to a cowbell, and the soldering thing is taped, electrical tape to the cowbell. So I can put this down where I can take this thing and put it down somewhere that I can do electrical work, and put a camera in really close, and then you will be able to see what I'm doing, because I feel like it's going to be relevant being able to see what I'm doing with the soldering. The idea is that the soldering, you'll need to be able to see where the soldering iron is going, and like the way that you touch the soldering iron to the part, and then once it's hot enough, you touch the solder to the thing that you're getting soldered rather than to the tip. It's never done like, okay, hold it over the piece, hold the soldering iron, and then melt the solder onto the soldering iron and drip it onto the thing. That does not how that works. So I feel like it'll be useful to continue to do that work sort of in macro close-up. And that's what I'm working on with building that stand with the ring light built into it, so that you can turn that on and then see what I'm working on. And that's going to be Wednesday, because I'm getting this stuff going on Wednesday. And hopefully, if all goes well, I can actually build something this coming Wednesday, because I'll be ready. But the thing about it is, there's multiple things involved with that DIY synth stuff, and part of it is just the very concept of modular synthesis. And so I don't know whether to some extent it might be useful to do like live streams with my regular rig and talk people through what I'm doing and why and how. That rig is currently going into a converter, and then it's getting mixed in Logic using Airwindows plugins. So that has never been more relevant to the software stuff that I do. But I'm still using hardware for so much of this, and happier with the sounds that I get off of that. I've been getting into things like I got some Dope4 filters, and I'm quite excited about working with those, because the thing about Dope4 is they are... I did not invent the circle of fifths, goodness gracious, no. The thing about the Dope4 filters and Dope4 things in general is it's kind of like me. It's kind of like Airwindows stuff in that they're a lot more affordable than the fancy pants, super boutique modules. You can get the Dope4 filters and various Dope4 things for generally very cheap as far as these modular things are concerned. And you just kind of have to know, like, okay, this one is a WASP filter. The WASP filter is that 4049 based one, which I'd like to also do in DIY form. And what it does is you can turn up the resonance on it and have it do this really gnarly, chewy kind of resonant craziness, which I think is very suitable for things like a bass. And next to it is a A108 VCF8, and you would never know until you do a little research that that's the one that acts kind of like a Moog ladder filter. So it's a little more expensive, but it's the Moog-alike. It's the one where it gives you, to some extent, that sound. And all of the Dope4 filters seem to have multiple CV inputs with attenuators on them, meaning that you can throw modulation onto them and just add a little tiny bit of it. And then next to that is I rounded it out with a couple of A103 VCF6 filters. And those are the Roland 303 style. Those have that acidy sound. And I've heard them compared to other ones, and they are really very persuasive as far as they get that tone, and they also have the CV ins, where you have two separate CV ins with attenuators, both of which could be used to modulate what you're doing. So you can put your envelopes in, you can put whatever. No. Moog-alike Dope4 filter. The A108 VCF8 6/12/24/48 dB low pass, 4 little outputs that you can use. That's the one that acts like a Moog-alike thing. I do not have a software filter for doing that. Honestly, I'm not all that sure that such a thing is really possible. So this is why I'm getting into a DIY thing. And yeah, one of the things I can get into is putting together audio, putting together music, and gradually learning to be able to music. Like, one of the things I want to get into is all the stuff that I've done in previous years have been essentially techno-based, when it's not just kind of prog rock or whatever. And I'd get into various problems regarding, I'd want to make just endless jammy stuff, or I'd want to track something and then overdub stuff over it, but I wouldn't be arranging. Instead, I'm trying to think of ways where I can start doing things that are more like compose and arrange it from starters, and go from there. That's the DAW idea that I have in mind, which could wind up seeing more. It's hard to tell how much that can be a thing, but it's just as clear an idea as anything else that I've got. It's just that I don't have the capacity to do it alone, but I won't necessarily be doing it alone. So we will see. And the trick with some of this stuff is as follows. I can do music on this setup to some extent, or to even quite a large extent. I've been redesigning it more and more to where I can think up stuff and go. I've been doing things mostly in a sort of techno bent, and when I hooked up with the forum Dogs on Acid fairly recently, I stumbled across it again. I was like, oh, this is where those London drum and bass guys are, right? Because that's one of the areas where my plugins get a following. Turns out they were talking about my stuff, and they were also really cool in a way that it wasn't the case for all of my social media a while back. And I was like, wow. And one of the things that I did was get my account on the Dogs on Acid forum ready and come up with a place to post my plugins there. So that's yet another place that I'm posting them. It's like Gearspace, KVR, Dogs on Acid, and Terry Manning's forum, which is more sort of your high-end old school engineers. And I'm welcome to post my announcements there as well in a little sub-forum that they have. And one of the neat things about the Dogs on Acid forum is that it's a whole other... It's a pretty lively crew. And when I started listening to their music, I realized this goes pretty deep. A lot's going on here. Some of them, like, I heard from Noisia that they liked the stuff that I do, and that was very delightful, because I like the stuff that they do in turn. And when I had listened to, say, Noisia, that being sort of very modern kind of drill and bass or future tech, or I don't know the exact genre classifications that they use, but I was digging into it and going like, this sounds cool and very aggressive, and it's like a combination between like insane prog rock, metal, and electronic music, only not. And I realized that some of the stuff that they were doing was very much in line with the stuff that I had done, or stuff that I'd grown up liking. For instance, your funk music or Frank Zappa or stuff, there was a real value in being able to do things like, okay, this drum and bass track is defined by it has a kick on the one, and I know how to put a kick on the one and in fact step it forwards just a tiny bit so that it has more impact. I've been doing that in the house music type stuff in terms of making stuff settle into a groove. But then a lot of the Noisia is like, if you have 16th notes, then they've got their kick on the one and they've got other percussion stuff, but then there's other kicks that are off a 32nd note from something. There's kicks that are like half a 16th off, and they're part of the fundamental groove, and they'd get really into constructing these things. And it's the same kind of way in which, like, deadmau5 will throw unusual time changes onto things. It'll kind of cycle in and out, and it'll construct entire songs around that. The people that are doing groundbreaking and valuable work in these genres, and deadmau5 is not in the drum and bass genre, but it's kind of the same deal. They're typically doing things like experimenting with, say, the Circle of Fifth stuff that I do, and musical elements there. But then there's other things about the genre, like their drums will be much more interesting than just thump, 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 thump. Unless it's not. Like the drum and bass boring rhythm, you know, the house music boring rhythm is dum-ch, 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 forever. The drum and bass boring rhythm is dum-ch, 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 forever. So either way, you can have a boring approach, but the people that caught on with the drum and bass sort of underground, which it's literally always just been an underground. That I like that part about it. It's like if you make really gnarly music, as long as you follow the basic genre signifiers, then there's an audience there that's like, this is what I wanted, and I like that. And by that I mean you just have to not have the kick drum being 4 on the floor. Yeah. All you got to do is do something that is repeating and interesting, but it's not 4 on the floor. Honestly, some of the drum and bass stuff, I swear to God, they're the secret love child of Captain Beefheart. If anybody's familiar with Beefheart. If you're not familiar with Beefheart, then go and listen to like Trout Mask Replica. And, there will be live coding today, but I'm working up to it. Go and listen to Trout Mask Replica. For instance, the first track, Frownland, is loaded with really, really strange things happening musically. And it sounds like total chaos because there's so much of it happening at once, but it's really not total chaos. Instead, it's a bunch of really weird things going on, all at the same time. And there was a classical composer guy who was also a YouTuber who did a detailed analysis of all of the little bits that were fit into it. But when you look at the rhythms of like avant-garde underground drum and bass, very frequently, even something that's fairly above ground, like Noisia, that's sort of breaking out into pop culture in its way, there's elements in there which is like, well, who's going to hesitate something a 30-second note? Well, Beefheart, or specifically Drumbo. John French, the drummer, composed a bunch of that stuff. The talk about Beefheart composing all of his things and then teaching them to musicians is complete crap. Beefheart was another one of those kind of madmen, which is how you get stuff done, but he took all the credit for the band, which was not reasonable. And so I'm very motivated at the moment to get back into music making in order to compose some stuff that will fit into drum and bass, because it feels like that's a kind of a spiritual home that I've just never thought to do. Because I always was like, well, I like techno, so I can do techno-oriented things, or I can do progressive rock-oriented things. And all the time, there's this weird little, underground that can cover a number of those bases at the same time, and no matter how weird you get, it just makes it better. So yeah. And that can also include, rather than just the hardware synth stuff, which as much as I enjoy it, if I can run this on the computer that I'm streaming from, which you're seeing right now, using the new version of ECVREC that lets me use the Apple encoder for sending stuff to YouTube, or indeed like multi-streaming or to Twitch at the same time or whatever. That means I could be doing live VCV rack streams, and that's something that people can also get. So, yeah, interesting prospects ahead. I'm going to try to not get in too much of a rush of it because I still have 248 Apple Silicon VST plugins to do. The guy that sort of walked me through the initial steps of it, I asked him, since it made things much less stressful for me, I asked him if he could pitch in to do a let's make the VST work, and he said sure. That's actually what he said. So that's happening in May. That's happening this coming month. And as far as the promised DIY hardware streams, it's going to be interesting, and I'm really going to just need to ask people. And maybe I'll start going to Twitch as well to see whether we can bring anybody else in. But I'm going to need to ask people, what do you actually want? I've assumed that what I needed to do was start soldering stuff together and build a synthesizer to sit in my little aluminum rack rails that I've made. And one of the things I'm determined to do is come up with ways of making this where I could throw some wires and jacks and things into an envelope and send them off to people so that you could have a start. I feel that's really important. And it's not that any given one is necessarily going to result in a person who's off and running and able to do the stuff. Sometimes that's not going to work. But every now and then, I will send stuff off to somebody who's like, cool, I can do this, and they'll start doing it. And that's worth it. That makes it worth it. Because you never know when, what seeds you plant are actually going to grow. The important thing is to go out and do them, rather than be like, I'm only going to try to plant the seed that I know is going to grow. It's like, that's not how seeds work. That's not how seeding a scene works. So yeah, there's the possibility that what people would actually like to see me do is put stuff together in VCV Rack, because you can run that, or do stuff in my hardware synthesizer, because that makes more impressive results than what I'll have immediately off of the hardware stuff. But it'll all come together. It's like further things to be interested in doing. Because one of the things in the stream up here, quite a while back, David said, it's going to suck when Chris retires or croaks and Apple releases a new file format and discontinues AU and VST goes bye-bye. Well, I don't think I'm likely ever to retire, because this is just what I do. That's kind of the point of setting up a existence like this, is you set it up so that it focuses around the stuff that you do. And then you just do that. And that's also the reason why I'm transitioning over to add the DIY synth stuff, is that's always been stuff that I've done. And I'm trying to make it accessible to people and come up with how to make that work. And as far as me croaking, well, I'm 53 years old. People live longer than that typically. When they're healthy, when they have money. I live in a house, I have enough money, and if I behave myself, like I cut my finger the other day and didn't go to the emergency room because I was scared of the cost, but I'm learning bit by bit to take advantage of like real people facilities, like going to the doctor, things like that. I think everybody out there can relate with me not feeling that that was accessible to me, but the fact is it probably is. So I'm not likely to croak anytime soon, especially if I don't stress myself out too hard. But that many years down the road, assuming it's that many years down the road, that's why I do open source. That's why I have seen fit to put my stuff onto a Microsoft-hosted thing called GitHub, where they benefit from hosting that repository of stuff. Did I get vaccinated? No, but I have an appointment early in May. I have an appointment around May 11th or 12th or something like that, and I'm going to go through with that, and I'm going to get the second appointment and stuff, at which point I can start traveling around, although I'll still be wearing a mask to be good, but at that point I'll be a little bit less isolated, so working on that one. And yeah, enough about this. Let's bounce over to the code. I'm just going to blink over to OBS to see that that worked. Good. And it does kind of appear that I haven't dropped any frames and everything seems to be behaving itself reasonably well. Yeah, funny, David, actually the funny thing is it's not a problem because you've been good about honoring, like, if I crawl off and isolate for a while, it's not like you're banging on my door being like, respond to me, respond to me. And that's really all I need. is to be able to take stuff at a speed that I need to take it. So it's all good. You're fine. You're totally fine. And I'm always happy to see you turning up around here again. So, coding. Let's see, first of all, here is our MackEQ as we have it. So we got our input gain. We've got crossover frequencies. I've got a bass and a high frequency control. Which I think is going to be, I'm not sure whether this follows the same rules as in trim. These are disabled at the moment. I've got an output pad in there. And this is where we've got it. So this is meant to be like manipulating the various controls. I wonder if I'm distorting. Is this actually so loud that we're distorting the mic? No, not really. It's just that you can plainly hear it, that's all. So one of the things I'm going to want to do is figure out whether 0.5 is unity gain here. And also whether 0.5 matches what you'd get on the 0.5 of the actual hardware, because it's kind of the idea there. So that's unity gain for the pre. Feels like maybe that's higher. And I'm wondering if it's because it's the same code. No, that's definitely midier. So what I'm trying to do here is exploring. Here, let me stop and answer questions a bit. It's starting to move. The more people show up to my streams, the more I'm going to have to either stop coding and talk to the stream, or I don't know what else, but I'll figure stuff out somehow. So the hardware model that I used was in fact an original 1202. And I wouldn't worry, guys, about bombing me with emails, because if you bomb me with emails and I can't answer them, I won't. I don't mean anything by it. It's just that I don't respond to every single thing, or sometimes I'll be really brief or whatever. And if you don't mind me not always responding, then we're all fine. Like, you could blow loads and loads of emails, and if it was a problem, you just wouldn't get an answer. It's just me doing all of the porting hundreds of plugins to new formats and things. So it's like, I think it's sufficiently obvious at this stage that there's generally enough on my plate that I can kind of choose how I want to handle things regarding whether I'm being responsive or not to stuff. Setting up console and channel. Well, here's one thing that I could do even right now. Remember how I said I have OBS doing a hardware encoder? One of the things I can do, in theory, this becomes possible. Let me launch Logic. And hopefully I'm set up with hardware over screen. What am I even doing? What can we see here? Oh. Hang on. Still thinking about what I'm doing. Let's go back to this. And just for fun, I'll cancel that one. And let's talk over what the question that you had, David, which is, how would I set up console, etc.? I would set up console, etc. like this. You can't really see all that much of it, but I can shrink the window. And that fits on the screen just fine. So this is what I've got stuff defaulting to at the moment. When I start Logic, it opens this template. And this template is how things are set up. So my answer to that is technically, this is literally what I'm doing at the moment. My hardware stuff has color coding on the wires that go into it, and I have these inputs on various channels. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are blue wires. They're going to inputs 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm no longer trying to define that as any particular thing. Although it might be worth fiddling with some of this stuff, because it says console, but some of these things are console channel. This one's not even defaulting to the neutral setting. And then some of these things are console cascade, meaning that what I've got for ride hat here, which is inputs 15 and 16, is meant to get my microphone inputs and my live drums for when I track those. And next to it, the kick drum input is actually just console 7 channel, but they're turned up as far as they'll go. It is depending upon what I choose to do. So a lot of these, like that's a console 7 channel at its default setting. I do intend to do the balancing with that and not the faders, because when I design something like this, I mean to use it as it's intended. I've got a bunch of predefined buses, but I'm not routing to any of them automatically. But this is the place where I can put like a MackEQ on the drum bus and then smash the crap out of that and get that output doing something. I can also bring in, console encode and decode, or this deep verb here is places where I could, say, bring in galactic or something. So you can kind of, actually, no, you can't even see it at this point. It's too far off the edge of the screen. But, let's see. There, see, if I was to put galactic in there, and then also put in, like, I'm going to go more in the direction of blanker templates rather than trying to prearrange everything, because I feel like that is a mistake that I've made in the past. And let's see, seriously, 2. So I could do one of my crazy deep reverb background sends by doing something kind of like this. And I would have that send, and that would go to the bus, which is running galactic at full wet. And then seriously, I can use that to boost the wideness of it quite aggressively. Like so, galactic will synthesize stereo out of stuff, and that's the way that I could get one of those super wide things. And then on the stereo out, as you can see, all the buses are summing to the stereo out, but also all the channels are at the moment. So if I had this one that's going to the bus and I wanted to send it to something else, I would go to, say, like the SYN bus for some special thing, be able to do it separately. And they're all converging on the stereo out, which has the console 7 bus for summing everything. It's got a clip only, just for safety purposes, and it's got an instance of monitoring so that I can check things out. And that's how I've got things set up for the moment. I don't have any channels going at the moment as far as setting things up. So that's basically how that goes. And that said, now I can quit out of Logic. Again, this is one of the things that I can do on streams now, if people want me to, and if it fits with what I'm already doing. And it's asking me if I want to save the document. I actually don't, because again, this is all kind of designed to so that I can put stuff together and not feel predetermined that I have to have this and this and this and this in any given track. Honestly, one of the problems I run into is that I build stuff where it's like, okay, I must have the chords, and I must have a separate bass, and I must have these percussion things, and then I set them all up, and then everything sounds the same. Because I didn't do like a track where it's like, okay, this is just a weird kick drum and a bass, and it's in a drum and bass genre, so it's not 4 on the floor, and then there's just like a clap. And it happens in irregular intervals, or there's just some kind of funny lead or something like that, or it's just a noise. It's a background noise that's going into Galactic, so it makes it very far. If I was to do that, then I'd have more distinctive stuff and it would happen faster and be easier. So this is what I'm working on going forward. So there's your answer. That's what I would set it up as. I would set up console like that. The basic gist of it is pretty straightforward. Oh, hello. Are we still streaming or did I drop off? Because I have a complaint. Stream's current bitrate of 14,625.7K is higher than the recommended bitrate. Boy, is it ever. We recommend that you use a stream bitrate of 4,500. Alrighty then. Yeah, that's because I'm using this particular form of stream. And yeah, it's not stable, but I am given to understand that if you tell it to limit the bit rate, you run into other problems. So we're just going to have to let YouTube complain. And that might also be a deal breaker as far as me being able to stream to Twitch, but we'll see. It sounds like I haven't fallen off of the stream yet. Fair enough. It certainly isn't dropping any frames, it's just that the encoder is flipping out, and this used to be what caused problems, but maybe it's not causing problems anymore. So, yeah, let's see now. The 1202 EQ, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think it is a shelf. But, it's continually complaining about bitrate. I guess I'll have to look at this stream later and see how it worked, because YouTube is complaining like mad, but that doesn't necessarily mean a problem. You can give high bitrate to YouTube, especially if you're streaming at a beyond, like a 4K stream, they will allow very high bit rates for that. The idea with that is that OBS apparently has an update where it doesn't kill your stream if you use the Apple hardware encoder, but this is probably the stuff that used to kill your stream. And now it just remains to see, like, whether the OBS update made it so we can do that. All remains to be seen. So yeah, let's bounce back to this while I talk. That is one way of guaranteed getting lower bitrate. It's mostly just visuals. Cascade is for anything that you want really high gain. Man, my phone is ringing off the hook. The ringer is off and the answering machine is off, so I just don't deal with being badgered by phone people, but it's really firing off a lot today. Cascade is for anything where you want lots of gain in the console 7 form. Various plugins on a channel. It depends upon whether the things work in between. Depends. But and on a master or aux, on a master bus or aux bus, console bus is going to be your first plugin, and you can go back out of console in your auxes, do stuff, and then go back in. That's another way to get really heavy overdriven mix is to have multiple places using console 7 Cascade. They can be in individual tracks and then also on buses. And the combination of those things will make stuff really huge and distorty, which might be what you would use. I don't tend to use ULAW for anything, so that's not actually so, but you are more than welcome to try. Who knows what might happen. And Bro says, TubeDesk not working. Okay, got it. I'm not really sure what to do about that, but I will note that. Bear in mind that's one of the interfaceless plugins. So if you're thinking it's not working because there aren't any controls showing up, you're wrong, it is. It doesn't sound very striking, but it is a desk form plugin, meaning it is a very small, subtle control, kind of like Interstage or the first coils, where you're not necessarily going to hear anything happen, and you're certainly not going to see anything because it doesn't have any controls. Probably that. Back to these noises. Back to not bypassing. Okay, that's definitely too mid-rangey. I feel like if I have this set up properly, I think this is where I left off. It is a oh, we're still bypassed, hang on. It's a way of getting... TubeDesk has no controls. That is all you get. Same with Desk and Transdesk. So I'm going to figure out whether this is the right amount of boostiness and figure out what the middle zone is. Because it feels kind of like 0.5. This feels more mid-rangey than this. Feels like this is more bass and treble-y. I wouldn't stick Desk plugin anywhere. It's just one of the older plugins that I've got. You could do either of those things. Try them and see if you like them. So here, let's go back to Xcode again. With a bit of luck before one comes around and I sneak off and grab a nap and call my mechanic because I have some car repair stuff that I need to get done. I wasn't reaching him all this morning. I'd like to at least nail this down as to what I wanted it to be. So here we've got our MackEQ input stage. These controls are what they need to be. Gain base and gain high are these things times 2. So 0.5 should be the correct amount, but it seems that they are not. Why is that? Well, one of the things we're doing is we are amplifying this stuff. I think this stuff is basically done. We did this a goodly number of weeks ago. And then our output, let's see, do we have the boost on the highs as well? So there's our MackEQ input stage just as it was, and then we take that and go further. The crossovers are worth dialing in by ear too. That's why I've got them on controls. Here's where we have our high sample turned up. Did we in fact distort these, or have we not done that yet? That's a really good question. So let's see, here's our filtering stuff that we're doing in 2 instances because this is MackEQ. And having done that, and that's pretty carefully calibrated, that needs to stay the way it is. I'm now wondering whether people got kicked off. Tell me whether you got kicked off the chat, whether the stream failed, because as near as I can tell, oh, hello. Drop frames 118, that doesn't seem good. Part of this is to see whether this new form of streaming does actually work or not. Our CPU is still very low. It's saying drop frames 118. It's saying excellent connection, but there's been as many as, I don't know how many, 22 people, and then it abruptly drops to like 11. So I do wonder whether or not I'm kicking people off the stream. David is apparently still here and asking questions, so does no further processing after NJD or dark plugin, or monitoring. You could use monitoring. Don't have any other plugins in there. All right, well, we will live with that, and it remains to be seen. I suppose I can do more research into how this works. Part of this research is literally what I'm doing now, which is doing a stream, going for a number of days on end, hours on end, and seeing whether it survives. I don't know why it suddenly threw a bunch of dropped frames, because it didn't for a really long time. But that said, it is, as they say, all good. I wonder whether I'll see more if I bring OBS up. I can see myself, but I can't see anything else. Maybe it's when I showed settings or launched Logic that it dropped frames. Don't know. Don't really care. Do we have the chat on screen? Is it? Yep, we do. Alrighty then. That's the thing, David, is that if the DAW does that, there's nothing I or you can do about it. So that's one of the reasons I'd like to do a DAW, so I can control that really rigidly and be absolutely sure that it's not even doing stuff like multiplied by 1. That doesn't do anything, does it? Unless you're dealing with open source stuff, you don't get to look into their code and find out what they do. So if I do a DAW, it will in fact be open source stuff, just like my stuff is, just like Surge Synth is, and so on. So let's see, where are we at? This is, okay, so we are doing our distort, and this is why, because this is our, stop that, distortion code, and it exists in the base sample, and for that matter, it exists in the high sample, so we do have our distortion code in both places. Seems good. We're down with that. So the question becomes, how do we voice this? And again, I'm feeling like setting things at 0.5, and I'm going to be trying to make it be 0.5 as a default. I would like for the bass and treble controls set to 0.5 to act like there is no EQ happening. And I think one of the ways I can fool with this is, we'll close that out for a moment. This is very much what I was running before. So let's hide that for just a second. And here, MackEQ 1202 drums. The one that says Daydream is from a YouTuber called Daydream Sound, who suggested that I listen to the direct outputs, which don't include the EQs. And that's where MackEQ came from, and where the initial stage modeling by itself came from. But what we want to listen to now is this. So this is the real deal. And I believe this is flat. So if that's flat, how does that compare to using this, which has an MackEQ on it? And the answer is I'm not really sure. What I'm doing now is trying to compare it up. See you later, Gribule. Comparing it with the real recording, which is probably, can we set this to something useful? See, it's peaking at around 12. On coils 2, if I'm not yes, I am using a biquad, but not in a particularly linear form. On coils 2, what I'm doing is I'm using that mid-range thing like Focus does, but invertedly. So coils 2 is passing through mid-range undistorted. And it is distorting the inverse of that, which is the lows and the highs that aren't part of that mid-range. It's distorting a complementary notch filter version of the sound, which I'm making by just doing the mid-range version of the sound and then subtracting it. So that gives me a lows and highs version, and that's the part that I'm distorting. So there is a biquad filter in there that is doing a roll-off so that at higher sample rates you can have that filtered out even though it's nothing but highs left. Thing is, the way that it's rolled off is designed to sound a certain way rather than to be like some technically accurate thing. It moves slightly depending upon where the cheapness is set. And it is not a perfectly, it's not a Butterworth or whatever. It's some kind of funky setting, which I think is actually slightly boosty. And it has nothing to do with being just before Nyquist or not. It's just an additional filter. So it does that thing for that purpose, but it does it for that purpose in a particular way that is shaped to make it sound, to me, more like what a transformer crapping out sounds like. That puts it in the same category. Nobody asked on like Gearspace or anything, but I was quite ready to respond. The same person asked, I would be like, oh yeah, this uses exactly the same thing that I was doing for the last few plugins of this nature, because I still believe in what I was doing and that hasn't changed. So it's still going to resist aliasing better if you're not running at 44.1K, and it's still not doing oversampling as people understand it. Same deal. Same deal as with MackEQ and so forth. And I really do use the way that that roll-off behaves to color and shape the way that the modeled thing is acting. Like I'm really on purpose not using perfectly Butterworth roll-offs or whatever in order to shape what the thing is doing. You'll probably actually get less aliasing with the cheapness cranked up. The saturation cranked up is also not going to be a thing because the saturation doesn't boost into it. Instead, the saturation lowers the clipping threshold. And as you continue to do that, it gets quieter and quieter. So if it gets that much quieter, all you're going to get is the mid-range EQ pass, which doesn't have any distortion products in it. So basically, like any plugin, it's going to have some aliasing, but the way that the saturation works is unusual in that respect, in that it is sort of lowering the boom. It's lowering the clipping boom onto the sound with more saturation rather than cranking out the gain with more saturation. Like this is cranking out the gain. And this, when I switch over to it, is supposed to be like the same thing. I'm going to set it here so that it sounds about right. And start switching back and forth between these guys so that I can get a bit of a sense of what's going on. Let's find some other spaces. That's all highs. That's all lows. I think with these ones I was just cranking up as far as it'll go. So what do we got? So how did I manage to make slew 2 low pass so well at Nyquist? What was in the code? That was essentially by accident. That was a lucky break. And the way that it worked, and this, I will never completely diss on the idea of like I hate oversampling forever and will never do it, because the thing is, slew 2 is me trying to program in oversampling and failing. The stuff in slew 2 is meant to be oversampling, and it's basically horribly wrong and doesn't actually work. If you measure it, it's garbage. It fails to do the oversampling thing correctly, but it makes a sound. And it's a distinct sound that is not what you get when you have real oversampling. It's something else. And that same sound, that same failed incorrect oversampling in slew 2 is also this incorrect oversampling that's part of, like, I know a guy that's very into density 2 for his sounds and considers it a secret weapon, and it's a bit of a marquee guy. And part of the reason for that is because density 2 uses this failed oversampling thing, which is not actually correctly oversampling at all, but it's my way of trying to do one that is more primitive and direct than you normally get. And as a result of that, what you wind up having is a different tone that's maybe a little bit more raw and direct than you normally get out of actual oversampling done properly. It's like that. It's like that. So let's see. This is the actual output of the device. That's actually quite a lot of gain. That's kind of a lot of gain. I'm wondering whether I can manipulate some of these things. I'm also wondering whether this is actually boosted in some way. doesn't actually work for oversampling. You feed supersonic sounds into it and you get aliasing out of it. It does different things. It doesn't effectively do the oversampling thing. Not compared to more by-the-book approaches to it. Let's try some other experiments. Firstly, this is what it sounds like when both the treble and bass are rolled off all the way. So what are my frequencies like? Trying to find mid-range areas. Which areas are specifically the hardware set to only the mid-range with both the bass and the treble rolled off completely? Clearly not this. Although this does show me what the bright is going to be like, but that's not what I want right now. We sure have a lot of extra gain on tap here when we turn this up. I'm thinking maybe I need to adjust my gain levels. Let's quit out of here for long enough to do that. And I can do this by, let's see. See, this is purely linear, so let's stop being purely linear. There, now these will both be power factors, meaning that if I have it set to 0.5, this is not a calculation I really need to do, but I'll do it anyway. If I have it set to the middle, then it's going to give me 0.25. Therefore, unity gain is 1. Therefore, if the middle needs to come out to be 1, rather than being gain base and gain high times 2 means that 0.5 ends up being 1 and being unity gain. Now it becomes 0.5 on the control turns into 0.25 on the actual number, so I multiply it by 4 to get 1 back out of it again. And that's not what that is. There we go. I multiply it by 4 to get 1 back out of it again. And now if it is set to, and there's an interesting side effect to that too, which I'm not sure is going to be a factor. I'm adjusting gain base on the output as well. I don't know whether I'm going to get a bug from square root of 0, but I do know that I can, hang on. I really don't need to do that every single time. But I do need to do it because it's part of the way that I cut the gain on this. There, now the gain stuff is the going into the control to be distorted, and the out base is going to be something else. I will have to find out whether it dies if it's at 0. I'm not sure what you get with the square root of 0. I may crash the program doing that, but that's fine. I'll find out. But I do know that if it is 4, then the square root of 4 is going to be 2. Let's check that. I get thinking about so many things that I don't know what I'm thinking anymore. Yep, indeed. So what this does is this dials back the amount of boost that I have so that the amount of increase off of this is less of a massive gain boost than it was. We could just add it and not be adjusting the gain levels. And that's another experiment that we could try. But for now, let's just do it. So I've now fiddled with my gain levels. And we're going to go back into this and this. Again, here's our heavily distorted. A lot of boost there. That is without all that much gain on the input, and then I turn up the input here. And that's the input and the lows being boosted. Pretty sure I'm using extreme settings. Now, so that middle setting should be neutral. Should be basically unity gain, meaning that it should sound kind of like what I've got here. I think I started with unity gain here. Turning the gain down again, and I think this is where I start fooling with the controls. Oh, I remember one of the things I was going to do. This is the mids only. Clearly, both of them turned down all the way. You know what? Let's mix with their eyes too. Fox and go span. Not all that helpful, but it's from around here to around here. Whereas, oh wait, hang on, I can't do that, can I? I would have to make a effect stack to do this and have span in there. Let's try to do it by ear the way I usually do. Definitely not acting exactly the same. Let's look into some of the other zones. Here's a bass boost and treble turned all the way down zone. What do we got with the new gain structure? I think one of the things we've got is we actually need to turn down the, maybe we don't even need any gain trim on the outputs. Let's experiment with that. I thought we did, but maybe we don't. We're distorting into this stuff just fine, but we don't necessarily need to do more. And of course, we might need a output clip stage just for good measure. So that might be let's just try it. We could just try that. Might or might not want to do another filtering. No longer need this. We'll take this stage from here. That's the input stage with all the gain that we have. We will sum everything, and then we go through yet another op amp without its own gain stages. And then let's see what we get here. Because that's yet another MackEQ style gain stage. And that will hopefully, well, nothing to it but to see what we did. It's possible this won't be finished and I'll just spend the week working on VST plugins for M1s. I don't know. But in case it is, let's see what we got. So here's our total meltdown. Attack Man with a question. You need to download the plugins that are currently being hosted in a MediaFire site. Those are the ones that are made to work with Gatekeeper and the modern stuff. Those work with the Apple verification rather than needing to defeat them. Also, you have to reboot the computer all the time when you need to get components to work. So let's see. There's our real thing. And here's what we're trying to get to happen. Oh, hello. A little sloppier, but what if we interesting. I think that was not bad as far as moving in the direction. I also think we're still getting I feel there's more brightness in there. Now we have all highs. What do we get here? I think some of this stuff might have been not just extreme settings. It's hard to tell what I was doing. A little losing the highs and more bass. So let's hear what that transition sounded like. Highs down, bass up. Let's try to replicate it. And gosh, maybe just the overall gain staging of this is a lot higher. What would happen if I just distorted my output a little bit too? Like, we're running this, and then the output of these circuits are always kind of distorting a little bit. Namely, boop, boop, which is our word length shift gain. Again, doing this multiplication is essentially lossless as far as tone quality is concerned. So we can do that. If we do that, what do we get as far as our output is concerned? Because we just don't have as much gain on tap out of this thing. What we get is hello, that's starting to sound a little bit more like it. What kind of gain are we talking about? This is what we're trying to match, which is with the bass and treble rolled all the way off. But full crank. This. Hey, neat. And then when we bass, and when we treble, so I am now curious as to whether I can just clone the other filters and whether that'll do useful things or whether it'll just be monstrous. But one thing I can do in my last 5 minutes of streaming is try that. So that'll go like this. We got our biquads. The biquads have been doubled. The VU meter is being clamped by my output gain, which is going to be a useful thing, so we're probably going to keep it. And let's not get too confused here. Got to do this up properly. So we're doing that thing, and we are mirroring what we've done. So same as we have, which limiter is best? I don't know. See which ones you like. NC17 does have its points. So this is the code that's doing a filtering, and then it's doing a resin peak in modeling the initial op amp. So the question becomes, if we do this on the output op amp and allow the EQ stuff to just be sandwiched between all this stuff, are we going to get it closer? Or it's just going to sound weird and bad somehow? Because it's essentially the exact same modeling as stacking MackEQs. And we're going to want to duplicate this exact algorithm twice. Here's our I'm going to see whether I can't speed this part of the process up just a bit. And in selection, and in selection, and this is the same code both places, so we'll duplicate this little chunk, and same deal. Here's our output clip stage. I'm feeling like, oh yeah, we have yet another version of it. Huh, okay. So many little output clip stages. Well, we do have the pad, so I guess we can leave that just because why not? So many op amps in the signal path. And here's our aliasing, suppression, filtering before the final clip stage, which we're not going anywhere near because we have a clip pad in here. And quad C in selection. Quad D in selection. Okay, let's check this out. Let's see what we made. We have just rapidly thrown another set of aliasing suppression filters on, and those aliasing suppression filters were already kind of boosty. So what do we got? They already had a tendency to, there's a presence peak in there. Interesting. That compares to real thing how? Real thing is here. That mid-range section sounds like this. You know, we're not miles away. See you later, Bo. I got to get going pretty soon, too. It's already 1. Well, it's going to have more to do with the super high, so let's go to one of those places. This is clearly full crank, no bass, all treble. What do we got? Now that we've done that, if this beginning part is actually full crank but with no EQs being added, I can't select that early on. Feels kind of brighter. Here's her super low stuff. It just keeps feeling like I have more gain on tap here. Some of this stuff is definitely both boosted. Okay, how about less distorted, all bright? Can we make that happen? It's not going to sound as good. It's digital. This is analog. But how close can we get? Go back to that mid-range. Really feels like we have more gain on tap from this. Maybe see, the thing is, in trim shouldn't really be manipulating the gain of anything else. Could it be that the way they are gain staged? Let's try something. Even more gain going into that other one. We're about done for the day. I'm not going to go for too much longer, he says, as he often does these things. But we're going to see whether we can't get that mid-range crank thing to act the way it did in the real deal. And by mid-range crank thing, I mean this. Because that's definitely both of the EQ controls rolled all the way off, but it's still incredibly saturated. So what do we get from this? Oh, hey, okay. That ain't that bad. kind of a lot quieter though. Oh hey, did our output just die? What did we hit by mistake? Interim. Suggesting that maybe mid? Oh boy, I'm confused. Trying to figure out why it would be padding down that part. It's definitely more distorted and it's sitting in the middle of there, but our highs get to go much louder, our lows get to go much louder. And if we do this, lows get to go louder, let's dial in some of this stuff. That's definitely a full treble crank. I think maybe I can dial the other one back just a tiny bit. Let's give that a shot. By the other one, I mean this. Biquad D should not be 1.15, it should be something else. What exactly, I ain't entirely sure, but I feel I'm getting too much boost there. Have it just straight up 1. It's still more than Butterworth. It's still a boost, but it's not as much of a boost. And then Biquad C is probably fine where it is. That's the roll-off going into the thing. So that's probably okay. And back to the bridge. Let's see what we got. Well, that was a fuck up. Oops. Didn't mean to hit that knob. Screwed everything up. You know something? I think we're about there. I think that's about it. I don't think I'm going to get much farther. That's about as far as it can go, being a plugin and all. One more tweak. Let's take that down just a bit. I'm not getting enough of that organic nature in there. I feel like the output op amp is clipping a little too easy. Granted, this gets in the way of me being able to get the gain staging I had in mind, but tone is maybe more important. Yes, it would. See, this is why people like this analog gear. It's this. Now let's see what that compares to. Really feel like maybe that's boosting everything. Yep, you're not wrong. Oh no, again? A little brighter. Oh wait, maybe this was highs boosted but the mids flat? I think it was 236 that I had on there. Freak out every time I touch that thing because it throws off everything. I think this is as close as I'm going to get it. think this, yep, is 44.1K. So if I fooled with this one, what I would get is I'm going to call that probably about as far as I can take it. I think that's going to do it for MackEQ. In some ways, it's not as close as trying to get just the one gain stage out of it, but that kind of follows. Being the more elaborate and complicated an analog device is, the more challenges you're going to get, especially if it's all full of all the millions of different kinds of distortion. Meh. Meh. We're going to call that as far as we can take this. Maybe one day there will be MackEQ 2 or something, but that's not going to happen right now. So, see you folks later. We're going away for a while, and I'll talk to you at some other time.